Hey, what up guys? Hey, it's Clint Coons here, and in this video, we're gonna talk about how to form a real estate limited liability company. Now, I decided to put this video together because people have been asking, how do you set up the LLC? Clint, you talk about the strategies surrounding them. So I said, all right, it's 2022, let's get a video out there so people set up their entities and get it started the right way. So what does it take to form a real estate limited liability company? Well, first off, what you need to come up with is the state where you plan to set up that LLC. Now, the way I always tell people is if you're setting up an LLC for a property that's in Ohio, well, then set up an Ohio limited liability company. The LLC should be set up in the state where the property is located. So once you figure that out, the second thing is coming up with a name. Now, choosing a name for an LLC for some people can be a chore. They sit there and they think about it and they overanalyze it. Let me tell you, names don't matter. Some ideas, make the name similar to the property address. Or if you don't have the property yet, just keep the name short, because there's no reason to have an extremely long name. I've seen people do this before where there's 37 consonants and 19 syllables inside of the name, and it's about 65 characters long. What is the purpose of doing that? Come up with something short. Then you got to check to make sure that that name is available. So the way you do this is you'll go to your Secretary of State's website. In my example, you'd go to the Ohio Secretary of State's website and you run a name search, because if any other entity is using that name, maybe it's a limited partnership, maybe it's a corporation, then odds are you can't use that name because it's either the same or it's too similar. So you have to always come up with a unique name. Now, it can be as easy as adding another word on the end of the name. So if I wanted to set up Brutus LLC, but that one's already used, I'll just call it Brutus 465, and then that should be able to go through. But again, you have to check with your Secretary of State to make sure the name is available. Now, once you've done that, the next thing you're going to need to do is prepare your articles of organization to set up the LLC. Now, these are pretty simple. If you want, you can download them from the Secretary of State. You go there, they have state-approved forms, or some of them allow you to actually file online. You go through their procedure where you create an account and you just go through and you set everything up online. You don't have to download anything. Now, when you're doing that, you have to ask yourself a few things, though. You're going to need to know a business address to fill these out. Now, business address could be your personal address. I don't recommend that, because now if we set up an LLC and there's going to be a property in there, it's going to be collecting rents from the tenants, and the tenants know where we live. So I would shy away from using a business address. At Anderson, we provide our clients an address in either Wyoming or Nevada. Yeah, even though they have an Ohio limited liability company, we'll use a Nevada business address there so it doesn't relate back to our client. So in addition to the business address, you have to have a registered agent. Now, the registered agent is someone that has a physical presence in the state where you're creating that limited liability company. You could be your own registered agent. Now, again, if you are your own registered agent, you're going to have to give them a physical address. And many times people then use their home address. I can't tell you how many mistakes I've seen where people create an LLC, they use a P.O. box for their business address, but then they choose to be their own registered agent and they put their home address there and they think somehow someone's not going to be able to figure out where they live. Well, we'll just track you through the RA. So many times it's good to use a professional registered agent here on your articles that has a physical business address in the state where you're located. You also need to know whether or not that LLC is going to be a member-managed LLC or a manager-managed limited liability company. Now, there's a lot that goes into deciding that. Typically, what you want to ask yourself is who's going to be involved as the owners? Those are the members of the LLC. And do you want all of the owners participating in the management decisions? If the answer to that is no, because maybe one or two of the owners do not have the time to participate, they're just there to invest and make money, then you probably shouldn't elect member manage. You'll want to go with the other form, which is called manager manage. And that is where a manager or one or more will manage that LLC. So this form is preferable when you have members that don't want to participate in the actual running of the business. They're there just for the investments, and you want to limit the control to one person. And point of fact, just the other day I was dealing with a client who had created a manager-managed LLC, and he was closing on a property. Two of the managers didn't want to do any of the business, didn't want to deal with that. They wanted him to take care of all of it. Well, of course, the bank and title who he is dealing with for closing, they wanted all three managers to sign and go through the paperwork. Well, we were able to fix that for him by putting together a resolution giving him sole control to handle this transaction. But again, this is additional work that you have to go through. So you have to really analyze, who do you want to be a manager in this LLC when you're setting it up? And the last thing you should look at when filing the articles is, do you want anonymity? Because if you want anonymity, that is, you don't want anybody to know that it's your LLC, then you're not going to be setting it up with your information listed anywhere. That's when you're going to go back to that structure that I always talk about, where the first entity you need to create is a Wyoming LLC down here. So here's your Wyoming LLC. And then when you file for your Ohio LLC up here, right here, it's going to make the Wyoming LLC the member manager. So it'll be a member managed Ohio LLC. So actually you have to set this LLC up first before you even attempt to create your Ohio limited liability company. Okay, so that gets you filed. Now, are you done? No, now you need to draft an operating agreement. This is key. You need to put together an operating agreement for your limited liability company, and you have to make sure that that operating agreement distinguishes whether or not it's a member managed LLC or a manager managed LLC. So there's different types of operating agreements for different types of limited liability companies. You got to make sure that your operating agreement matches the type of LLC you're actually setting up. So after you've done the operating agreement, you're going to need to get an EIN. Now, the EIN is where you're going to apply to the IRS and you're going to choose a tax status for your LLC. It's getting complicated, isn't it? This is why I tell people, if you're not experienced in this, you probably shouldn't go about creating your own companies. It just doesn't make sense. I often refer to high value versus low value. You know, if you're a real estate investor, your high value is going out there and investing in real estate, not setting up the LLCs. That's low value work for you because you can mess it up, you don't know what you're doing, and it can create problems for you down the road as far as liability or audits. All right, sidebar there. Now, getting your EIN. You have to determine whether or not this LLC is going to be treated as a disregarded entity, a partnership, an S Corp, or a C Corp. Now, typically for our limited liability companies that own residential real estate, we're going to set them up as a disregarded LLC if there's one owner, or if there's more than one owner, then they're going to be treated as a partnership. So you have to make that election when you apply to the IRS for that EIN. And oh, by the way, go back to the previous step about the operating agreement. Whatever tax election you choose, it needs to be recognized in your operating agreement as well. I've seen operating agreements before that have been presented to me to review. They say that the LLC is treated as a disregarded entity. Then I look and I see that their tax filing, they said they wanted to be an S corporation. I tell them, hey, you got a serious problem here. Your operating agreement doesn't come anywhere where it needs to be to reflect how you set this up from a tax standpoint. Okay, so after this has been done, you got your EIN number, then you have to determine whether or not your LLC needs to publish notice in a local newspaper. Now, some states require that in order to set up a limited liability company, not only do you file it with the state, you also need to publish notice in a trade journal, a business newspaper, to let people know, hey, this company is now in business. Now, it's not uniform, but you need to check into that. After you've done that, then you want to decide whether or not you need to get a business license. Now, business licenses are typically going to be at the county or the city level where you're conducting your business. So if I had a rental property, let's say in Tacoma, Washington, you'd want to contact the city of Tacoma to determine whether or not there's a business license that is needed for that type of rental activity. Now, after you've got your business license, your operating agreement, all that set up, then it's time to head down to the bank to get your bank account open for the LLC and bring all of that paperwork with you. You bring your articles of organization, you bring your LLC operating agreement, you bring the EIN letter. Yes, you're going to receive a letter from the IRS recognizing your company, and it'll have your EIN number on there. You got to bring that letter with you to the bank to open up your bank account. Now, once your bank account's opened up, you want to put some money into it. You know, you can fund it with $100. It really doesn't matter here. And then the last step I would recommend you do is set up your QuickBooks. So when it comes to establishing an LLC, one of the mistakes that we see time and time again with real estate investors is they don't set up QuickBooks for their business enterprise. And this is going to be important because if you ever want to deal with lenders, or particularly you want to see a profit and loss or a balance sheet, when it comes to preparing your tax returns, your tax preparer is going to ask you for your financials for that LLC. And that is why having a good set of books and records can ensure that you won't run into tax troubles in the future. So those are the 8 steps, maybe 9 there, that you need to implement if you're going to create your own real estate limited liability company. And heck, if you don't want to do it, I got a link down there where you can set up a free strategy session, and we at Anderson can discuss with you how to create an LLC and do it for you. Hey guys, thanks. If you liked the video, give me some likes. And if you're not yet a subscriber, well, you know what to do because I've told you many times. Take care.